Hello and welcome to another Source Gaming discussion. I'm your host NantenJex, and joining me today is a very special guest, a well-known Nintendo writer and a frequent guest on the show. It is NintenDaan.
Hello everybody.
So, NintenDaan is joining me today because today is the Switch's...
Don't call me NintenDaan. Don't call me by my internet name. I'm not like you guys. Call me just Dan.
Just Dan. Okay, fair enough. Dan is joining me today for the Switch's 1 year anniversary. It's quite... It feels like time has flown by. Like, a year ago I remember running around struggling to find a Nintendo Switch to get at a shop. And now, a year in, I feel like almost everyone has a system. I mean, heck, it's even outsold the Wii U in 1 year.
Well, less than a year. It has been in 9 months or so.
Yeah. So, and I can see them all in shops quite a bit around the UK. So I feel like the stock shortage is done. It's settled down, everything. And the Switch is still on the up and up. There hasn't been any kind of lull or anything, and it's quite impressive. But let's tackle this bit by bit. Dan, how have you been finding the Switch over its 1 year? Just general impressions.
It has been really impressive from a sales perspective. I think it does a lot of things right when it comes to allowing to be a platform that can play video games. In comparison to the Wii U, it's vividly clear. Because the Wii U's first year, even regardless of the 2 years that came after, the first year was particularly slow. And this year it feels like almost every single week there was something new to play. And particularly from, let's say, August till now, the amount of games that came out on the eShop, including third-party titles and first-party software, has been sort of incredible.
Yeah, I remember back in September, October, around when Golf Story came out, that there was just 17 to 19 games on the eShop almost every week.
Well, like I said, that started around September. I noticed then, because the first week of September was still really slow. There was 8 games, but then it quickly moved on to 12. And from there you could see the rise of a lot of games per week. And it has been that's ever since, with the only exception being the first week of January, which of course it is.
Yeah, well, it's the first week after New Year's is a very lull week. In fact, January itself is one of the only few months where Nintendo themselves didn't actually release anything.
Well, they didn't have to. The indie games and anything else there sold it for them.
Oh yeah.
And it still gets that amount every single week, so why should they bother week by week? It's also likely why we don't see those hamster Nintendo arcade games so often, because we only had 2 so far. Even though Hamster is still releasing games every single week, so why the heck can't Nintendo?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's quite impressive how they've managed to keep the launch line up, and especially the first half of the year. Everyone said it how the first actual launch day of the Switch was a bit bare bones, with basically just Zelda and Bomberman to keep people entertained. It very quickly...
Fast RMX was there,
Fast RMX.
and what else was there?
Snipperclips, was it there on the day, or did it come a week later?
Snipperclips was absolutely there.
Okay.
I'm trying to think what else. FOS was there. I think it was a good amount of stuff there on
There was
on
1-2
day.
Switch.
1-2 Switch was there, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I still had plenty to play on day 1. Also, Blaster Master was already out in Japan, so I downloaded that, and Disgaea, and Puyo Puyo Tetris. So, if you had multiple accounts and know how to do it, which was very easy and still pretty much is, you had a good amount of games to play, I would say, or at least to choose from.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Although comparatively speaking, when you compare it to say the Wii U's, even the Wii U's launch lineup, which had something like 20 odd games, full retail games as well. A lot of the Switch's launch day 1 lineup were eShop games, which I think aren't wrong. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But
Right.
I think a lot of people looking outwards into it only saw the retail stuff, which being Zelda and Bomberman and 1-2 Switch. And in Japan, Puyo Puyo and Disgaea.
Yeah, I mean, and Blaster Master. But yeah, there's still, once again, there was plenty of stuff available for you to choose from, regardless of region, or if you have multiple regions, it's even better. It's just that when only like the weeks continued is when you really started to see what the extent of it was.
No, true. Which is very different from the Wii U, which pretty much came out with a very strong launch lineup, I'd say.
And they were for banging. Afterwards, it kind of died a death until March. And I think that's the difference.
Warrior.
You don't need to have Game Wario came out in June, my friend.
It was March somewhere. I think
in Japan, but okay. But that's the only region of the 3, which isn't really good for the people who are listening to this podcast, particularly.
I guess it's true.
So they had to wait until June for the next Nintendo title, which was insane.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's a 6-month wait. That's
exactly
Super Nintendo levels of bad, which also had a bad launch lineup of like 4 games. But back then, the NES was also still releasing games, so I don't think anyone particularly cared.
Yeah, people were kind of accepting it back then.
Yeah,
and I think even though the launch lineup for the Switch was small, I think there was still quality there.
Oh yeah, there was definitely quality.
And that's the most important thing. You can release with many titles if you want, but if half of the titles nobody's interested in, why should you? They were very selective, which I think was a good thing. And then continue to move the momentum forward week by week, which is the most important factor here. I mean, titles like Snake Pass and Graceful Explosion Machine, what have you, came out in the weeks thereafter, which continued the momentum going in the weeks that still felt kind of dire. And now that feels the complete opposite, where you just don't have enough time or money to choose from all of the games that are releasing.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. Like, it was a lot back in when these games were slowly coming out. It was a lot of good quality titles and paced out quite a lot. Now, obviously, I'm happy that there's a lot of good quality titles, but as we said, there's so many titles coming out that I hope that if this continues in the future, that some of them don't get overlooked.
They already are. If you look at the European press releases for the downloads, there have been already a number of titles that released only a few weeks before that and already had permanent discounts.
Oh, wow.
And that's not down to Nintendo in the first place, but I will say that I feel that their store is bad. I feel that their Nintendo eShop on Switch is not good.
Well, I think that's a good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk about. I wanted to tackle what Nintendo did, what you thought they did really well this year, and what you thought they did really bad this year. And I guess we'll start with the bad.
Okay. So, would you move on with the point I was already making? I think their Switch eShop is the worst shop they have. And I'm not trying to bash them too hard, because as a means to play and download games, it's not bad. But when it comes to discovery and knowing which games came out maybe a week ago, that's where it becomes finicky. Because the front page of the Switch eShop, like the new releases page, only has 24 slots. And considering now about 15 games a week, maybe more, maybe less, there's half of the games that released the past week can already not be seen on the main page anymore.
That is quite bad, and especially comparatively to when they had it with the Wii shop, which I've been looking over the past few weeks because they're going to be closing down aspects of it in March. So
only the points aspect.
Yeah.
You can still now add points, but after March you can't anymore.
I've been running through that, trying to add points to it so I can download as many WiiWare games that I missed out on. Over its year. But even looking through there, the front page for that, which just had the news on, had all the games scrolling by, was quite charming. And because the games auto scrolled, you got to see through them. I feel like on the eShop's front page on the Switch, you have to manually yourself scroll down and see what's there.
I think what people then say is, but the Wii Shop was so slow and everything. I get it. Here's the thing. The Wii Shop was a web app before there were web apps.
Yeah.
That was a really early weapon. From what they did with it, that was really impressive back then. Of course, you can laugh at it now in 2018 with all the smartphones that you have. But back in 2006, in early smartphone days, WebOS was one of the mainstays next to Google and Apple.
Yeah.
So of course you can once again laugh at that now, but I get it. But having a shop that is now like this in 2018, I think is more unacceptable the way that Nintendo does it on Switch. Because you have the new Switch, sure, you could make the argument there, but not everybody will look at the new Switch. Some already are predetermined on what they want to buy, or just want to look through pages and see what the games offer. And for that specific audience, I think the Switch eShop is not well suited for it at all.
Yeah.
There needs to be some sort of discoverability. If it will be for some mere tiles that they did on Wii U and 3DS, or you make a scrolling list like you did on DSiWare and WiiWare. But there needs to be something. Just a little smirk here that makes it more interesting to use.
No, I think the Wii Shop really does need an update. I mean, like I said, going back to the Wii, just trying to find the games that were good to download, the games that I wanted to get, was really simple. Like, you could split everything via publisher or via genre. You could look at the best selling, you can look at the best reviewed, you could go through it like that. But on the Switch, you can't really do any of that. There is a way to look searches up, but you could either manually search it or you can look for best selling and discount, and that's about it. You can't split things up any other way. You can't split it between publishers and developers. You can't. I think can you organize it by price even?
You can, but you first have to go into the search option, then go to the search options and then put it in.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of finicky in design, I feel.
Yeah, a lot of extra steps that aren't really needed.
Not really. And you look at, because Xbox has recently updated their shop too, and it feels a lot sleeker now, like with the search option on top and everything. I still think that Nintendo and PlayStation are very murky in that sense, and Nintendo start to show its cracks, which is interesting, because the amount of quality games is higher than on PlayStation Store right now.
Yeah.
Because PlayStation Store is kind of starting in Steam Micro.
Yeah, no, I've seen and I've heard from the indie developers how PlayStation Network has been coming lately.
Yeah. So if Nintendo wants to keep this Nindies momentum, as they call it, then they need to own up to it and make sure that the shop is something that everybody can use.
Yeah. I think that's one of the various things they need to update from the Switch's OS. I mean, another issue a lot of people had was from the main UI itself. I like the sleek design. It's very mobile, and I like the square icons. But there's so little you can do with it.
Yeah.
There's no background music. You can't make things into folders. I don't even think you can organize the order that the icons go in yourself.
The library menu is a mess.
Yeah.
Like a big mess. And I am somebody in the rare group that gets a lot of games in, so I test a lot of stuff out on a weekly basis. But if I forget about something and I need to go back to it quickly, like a few weeks on, it will be somewhere down there and I will have to look for it. Because there's no search option in your own library, which is weird. You cannot sort them in a specific way, like by name or something. You are kind of screwed if you don't know where that specific game is in your game library.
Yeah, which is really awful, really, because it's just you want it to be something that feels joyous to use, and instead it just ends up coming off as cumbersome, and it's especially painful when both the Wii U and 3DS and Wii all had really great UIs.
Yeah. And once again, I think that for means to play games, I think that the Switch is fine. I mean, you start up a game and it's there, it's done for.
Mm-hmm.
I just think when it comes to the little things, like everything around it, like the lack of touches, the lack of care in the library, that's when you kind of lose me.
Yeah. All right.
But on the positive side, once again, I will say this to start with: it's an excellent platform to play games on. Regardless of where you are, on the go or at home, or having those row of icons on your main menu, you press an icon and you're good. You play a game, which I think is something that's lost in the current generation of smartphones and other consoles, because they tout media features, they want you to be online, they want you to do this, they want you to do that, all of the things in between. Like, it can be a million different things.
Yeah.
Here it's just like, you want to play a game? Here you go, man.
I quite like that in the Switch. They took into account the portability and that people's power might die on the go. And I particularly enjoy how when you can just step out of a game and it saves it exactly where it is and you can step back into it. So as long as you don't close the program itself, which you have to do yourself, like, you can very quickly put the Switch down and pick it back up again later and have lost no progress.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic about that game console. Yeah. The Switch is something that needs to be with you everywhere. And considering the game doesn't bother you as much as other consoles, it's just great, honestly. And I think in another sense, what I think is great about the Switch is the fact that all of your files are really well manageable. Because, once again, with other consoles, you need to go for various settings to find, for example, your save data or something like that. Here it's all well designed in the system menu. I think the system settings are comprehensive, have everything you need, and they're really well searched. I think those are the most well put together aspects of the UI. And switching the accounts is also just a breeze. You just say, I want to play with this account, and once again, you're good. And the advantage of having that account system is, unlike PlayStation, where you need to go back, go into another account, and then start playing, is that you just start up an account and get on other regions eShop, use a service that Europe doesn't have, or America. Do something with the fact that you have multiple regions on a singular console. It's well thought through.
I will say that being able to make foreign accounts on the Switch is far easier than I found it to be on the PlayStation Network. I found, like, being able to jump, because I have a Japanese, American, and UK-based account, and I think on PS4 I have an American and Australian account as well as my European one. And making it for the Switch was just so much... At first I thought it was going to be complicated. And then after looking into it for a few seconds, I realised how simple it was. But trying to make the ones I had on PlayStation, I felt like I was jumping through loops for a while. To try and you have to fill out
just to get a game, huh?
Yeah, just to get a game.
Yeah.
And it's so.
And I think that's
one of the things that I really like about the Switch is its region freeness. And how open it is.
That's not even it, because like a console easily can be region free, and Xbox is region free, and PlayStation region free. The thing is, with ease of use of that region freeness, once again, the switching between accounts and how you set it up is so gosh darn smooth. And then once again, you can use it with any account you like. You don't need to hop in and hop out between different accounts. You can just play it on your main account and play it with friends on that specific friend code.
Yeah.
So it also creates scenarios that I found a bit less interesting. Like, for example, there are 3 different versions of Splatoon 2 now. One for Japan, one for America and Australia and New Zealand, and one for Europe.
Oh, wow.
So I'm still wondering if I should get an American or a Japanese version of Splatoon, because I'm so addicted to it. I want to participate in more Splatfests. But it's interesting how Nintendo sees that stuff, and I still wonder what the future will be. It still seems like they want to separate some specific games while other are left to their own accord.
That seems to be the way it's going, because one thing I wanted to bring up, and something that I quite enjoyed, is how buying some games in other countries, and not every game does this, it doesn't matter what region it's from, it's all about your account. So Legend of Zelda being the perfect example, My copy of The Legend of Zelda, just like my Switch, is Japanese. But because my account is European, when I put the Japanese game in, it comes up all in English, as if it's the European version. And if I if I want to play it in Japanese, I just put on my Japanese account, and it automatically changes everything over in the language. And I know Zelda's not the only game to do this, and Nintendo aren't the only publishers to do this either. I know Square Enix's game that they released really early on, that got physical in Japan, I can't remember what it's called now. The RPG. It's a bit like Chrono Trigger. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. Secret of Mana, right?
No, not Secret. It wasn't Secret of Mana because it was released
Romancing
worldwide.
Saga?
No, it was very early game. It was it was already on PS4 and Xbox One when it came to Switch. And I remember a lot of people were looking forward to it, but it only got a physical copy in Japan. And it got released only on the eShop in Europe and America.
Oh, that game.
Yeah, that game.
I don't even like that game, so I completely forgot what its name was.
I
only remember good games.
Well, I remember that being one of those games where I could have bought the Japanese version and it would have played in English and I could have had a physical copy of it.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I just remember that being a thing for quite a lot of games. Now back in Europe, I haven't noticed at all if any other game is like this. It obviously sounds like Splatoon 2 isn't. But
yes, Splatoon 2 and the upcoming release of Kirby Star Allies isn't.
Okay.
So it seems that they are choosing specific releases where they don't want to opt into that stuff. Not every single release does it, but there are a number of releases that are like blocking the multiple language options.
Okay.
I'm not sure on what base they're choosing it from. Maybe because they don't want the people to early download it from Japan.
That could be true, although Kirby comes out worldwide all at the same time, doesn't it? And so did Splatoon 2,
here's the thing. In Japan, it comes out a number of hours earlier. Having only Japanese there might be just a prevention measure of people just downloading it from the Japanese eShop.
Nah, I guess that is a true factor. And then you also do have games like Fire Emblem Warriors, which came out a month earlier or something.
Well, that's a different scenario because that was also a different publisher.
Oh yeah, but that's true.
And we have seen that also with eShop games, where certain games are published by Japan in one region, in Japan by one publisher, and by another publisher in Europe and North America, where they block out all certain languages of other features. And then it doesn't pop up as a bought game on other regional stores.
Okay.
So it mostly comes down to publisher or if Nintendo wants it, one of the two. With Fire Emblem Warriors, I already knew exactly what was gonna happen because it's Koei Tecmo in Japan, while it is Nintendo Europe and North America.
Yeah. Okay.
And Nintendo goes the extra mile promoting it in Europe and North America, so of course they want to have the sales.
Yeah, no, of course. They want all their effort to pay off.
With something like Kirby, I don't really get it. That's another thing.
Yeah, Kirby seems like a weird one because Splatoon, with its online focus with the Splatfests and them being unique to each region, I kind of understand a bit more. But Kirby's not
I think it's kind of
an online.
It's kind of silly. Like Europe and North America could have been on one server.
Yeah, that's true.
Of course it's their choice, but I still think that regardless of that, Europe and North America could have had similar Splatfests, and there would have been zero issues.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what the deciding factor is for stuff like that. Even just letting people access any server they want from their copy of the game. Like how tons of online games do it. Like Dragon Ball FighterZ does, although that has loads of its own problems. And, yeah.
Right.
So, I think we've gone over good points, we've gone over some bad points. Let's give the Switch its kind of birthday review, right? How has it done overall in its year? How would you rate this compared to previous Nintendo outings? And do you think this momentum is going to continue on?
I think, here's the thing, I always look in hindsight and I think it's too early to give the Switch like its full due, because we have only been up to a year. We can say, oh, it has been a full year, but that's only 1 year in a console's life cycle.
Right. But like comparatively, I guess this 1 year, how's the Switch done in its first year?
Oh, exponentially well, better than we all expected. I think it has done way better than we all anticipated. And particularly from a game's perspective, it has been massive.
Yes.
But also from the impact it had on the further public outside of the realm that actively covers games, I think it has been really great to see. I've seen multiple people buy a Switch, which I have barely seen with the Wii U. So that alone makes me very excited for where the Switch is going. It has a lot of sales potential still, especially with the games and franchise that are still coming in the next 2 years. But there's also a lot of possibilities there for further expansion, which we're seeing with stuff like Nintendo Labo. And that's going to be the start of the second year, and there we're going to see how it will sell outside of the gamer's realm. And we've been kind of seeing it with families buying it here or there, but that will be the real task of selling it to a wider public and making this a must-have for multiple consumer groups, because the gamers have something that they can take on the go or dock at home, while families have something they can take along with in their car, in the back seat, or put in the dock and play with 4 people, which is a very powerful thing. But the most powerful thing here must be the games. And we know a little what's coming out this year. We know up to May what's coming. Mm-hmm. And I really sincerely have to hope that by April we know what's coming in the summer.
Yeah, we have to know before E3. And I still want to know stuff about Yoshi and Fire Emblem, and because I'm still imagining those to be summer games at the latest.
Me too. Yeah.
And they can't keep us. Sure. They can't just keep us on just a mini direct until E3.
Yeah, I think that would be a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do completely agree with you on like all these fronts. Like the Switch's first year was phenomenal in its software and just how it outreached. It hit both. Obviously, Nintendo fans it was always going to hit, but it managed to bring back gamers who stepped away from Nintendo for the Wii U era. And I think this year is going to be a focus a lot more on trying to get the casual consumer back, and Labo is obviously a big step towards that.
I think the second step of this year is also the Nintendo Online aspect. Because, honestly, and I feel very strongly about this, they are in a bad place with that stuff. Having an online service which you have to pay for 1.5 years after the console is out is not good.
Yeah, they need to try and convince people who have been so used to it being free for 1.5 years. Why they suddenly have to start
I think there's a chunk of that audience that will say well, I've had my due with those games, I don't necessarily need to play them.
Yeah.
So they need something along that thing. And if it's not Smash Brothers, they are in a lot of trouble. And I mean that really, because what other franchise does Nintendo have that can be really strongly supported online?
Unless they try and make competitive multiplayer Metroid.
Well, that's not going to happen, is it? That worked so well for Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, didn't it?
Hey, I really liked Metroid Prime Hunters Online. I might be one of the few.
But that's not a console comparison. The only console comparison we have is Metroid Prime 2 Echoes.
Okay, I guess they're just going to have to port Hunters to the Switch then. Just going to have to do that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen either, no, is it?
Well,
but honestly, they need something big for that thing, because next to the actual online service, they need something that can push people towards a subscription feed.
Oh, I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of people, like with Splatoon 2 and ARMS, and even Mario Kart 8 Deluxe being so long that they don't necessarily need to do it. And Nintendo, I don't think coming out with a new IP would be able to convince people. I think something big and established would need to be, and it'd have to be something where online is quite prominent.
For sure, yeah. And I think that's also the biggest challenge that they're currently facing, because they are now facing an uphill battle. They have now delayed it until September. They must have a big reason for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally hoping that the online comes with basically all the fixes to the problems that we discussed with its UI and all sorts. I'm hoping that the online brings virtual console. I'm hoping the online is like the Switch 2.0 almost. Like, it completely revamps everything and makes it kind of what I think a lot of people wanted it to be from day one, but just wasn't the case.
Right. I just hope it's Smash Brothers. Like, I really hope so. I know we can make laughs about it, but honestly, I don't know what else they're gonna do, because it's gonna be even tougher come September if they don't have anything.
You're talking to the guy from the Smash Brothers site. I just want Smash Brothers to be announced. It could come with the online. It could come before the online. I'd be happy.
Well, with the online would be the best scenario, because you already be forcing people to buy that subscription.
Yeah, no, I agree.
We'll see. They have announced. They said they're gonna make it also viable and interesting for people. So we'll see what they are gonna announce come E3 or thereafter. But I don't have the strongest hopes yet.
Nintendo has a lot of convincing to do. It doesn't exactly have the best record of online.
It also helps that they released a very bad online app for your smartphone.
Exactly.
So
They're not
which you can only still use with one singular game.
I know, that's ridiculous. Splatoon 2.
Yeah.
It's just a Splatoon 2 app, basically.
Basically. Without calling it Splatoon 2.
Well, thank you, Dan, for joining me to talk about the Switch's birthday, basically.
No worries at all.
Hopefully in 2 years' time we can come back to this and we can look back at everything that the Switch has now improved on.
Right.
And we'll have.
We should also just talk about the games at some point that released during the first year, because there have been plenty.
We can talk about the games at a later point. I think we've discussed enough about the Switch itself. And so, Thanks again for joining me. Do you want to let the good people know where they can find you?
Okay, good people, you can follow me on Twitter at NintenDaan, which is NantenDaan. There is also YouTube, but that's Nintendo with a 1 at the end. Go Nintendo, Game Explain, and Nintendo World Report, so much more. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And you all out there know exactly where to find me on the Source Gaming channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, then hit that big red button and give us a like if you enjoyed our discussion. And always remember to return to the source.